Dear audience, good morning and welcome you all in the seminar on the nexus between rural livelihood sustainability and climate vulnerability, a study from the northeastern flatland of Bangladesh. Today, Mr. H.M. Tuihedur Rahman, PhD candidate, McGill University, Quebec, Canada, will be presenting his PhD research outcomes. We are delighted to inform you all that today we have Professor Dr. Wahiduddin Mahmud, Chairman Economic Research Group as our chief guest. We also have Professor Dr. A.K. EnamulHaque, Director, Asian Center for Development, and Professor Dr. Muhammad Uddin, Vice Chancellor, Metropolitan University, Sylhet. The Fellows of South Asian Network for Development and Environmental Economics are joining us live on Skype. Now, I would like to invite Professor Dr. A.K. EnamulHaque to give his welcome address. Please, sir.
Assalamu alaikum and good morning to everyone. I think this is the seminar. Okay. So this is the second time that we are meeting here with Tuihedur Rahman, and let me congratulate Tauhid for finishing almost a year of research in the field. Let me also summarize how we started. SANDI is a South Asian network of environment and development economists. We were working on South Asian issue, and we realized that there is a shortage of research proposal coming from Bangladesh. So based on that hypothesis, we thought that we should help some of the Bangladeshi researchers abroad who are doing their PhD research and give them research funding so that they can complete their PhD thesis on issues related to natural resources in Bangladesh. And that committee was headed by Professor Wahiduddin Mahmud. So we had applicants from all around the world. 3 of them were selected. The first one was from the UK University. He finished his work on Sundarban. It's already published in a journal. Then the other one was from Australia. He's from Darwin University in Australia. He is still working on his final piece of research, and he's working on Chittagong hill tracks. And third one came from Tauhid. He is working for a PhD in McGill University, and this one is on the haors and floodplains of Bangladesh. So based on this, it was a nice geographic distribution. I don't know how it happened, but it happened nicely in terms of natural resource and its relationship with the livelihood of people. So given this, they were granted the research funding, and for which we needed a host institution. And I'm very happy, and I'm grateful that Metropolitan University has agreed to host him for a year in order to help him at least have an office space in this university. And I'm grateful to Saleh sir for this. So as a result, he has finished his work. After completing his work, so he went back to McGill, went to his research supervisor, got the feedback, and now it is time for him to present what he has achieved. Now, obviously, most of us are economists, but Tauhid is not an economist. His research area is natural resource, and he is working in the Department of Forestry. I think that is my understanding. So I think we would like to, and he has moved out of forestry, obviously, or you were in the swamp forest, probably in the swamp forest. Okay, so that is. So because he's actually a product of Shahjalal University, that is his other background. So based on this, I think he has done his work. I'm eagerly waiting to see what you have done and what you have performed. I know there will be set discussions. I will not go inside the story what he has done, but I would like to congratulate him for working on this issue and would like to see the research benefits the community in some way. So let us see the knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your welcome address. Now, I would like to invite H.M. Tuihedur Rahman to present his paper.
Good morning and welcome you all to my presentation. My presentation is about the nexus between the rural livelihoods, sustainability and climate change in the northeastern floodplain of Bangladesh. Rural livelihoods, as it is defined by IPCC, is the resources used and activities are undertaken by the community members for their survival and subsistence activities. Rural livelihoods actually depends on the social ecological system, that the accumulation of social system as well as the ecosystem on which community members derive their resources for their betterment and development. Natural resources and the opportunities itself dictate the livelihood activities of the communities, and the social system, which is highly vulnerable to climatic stresses or highly susceptible to climatic stresses, are actually the base of resources on which the social by the internal factors, where the internal factors are social, political, and economic processes. External forces are something like climatic stresses or the political changes in different stages. Sustainable rural livelihoods, it's said that according to the sustainable rural livelihood frameworks, it is assumed that the sustainability of rural livelihoods is dependent on the accumulation of 5 different capital assets, including social, natural, manufactured, financial, and human capitals. And these capital assets are connected to each other. That means when one capital asset is obtained, it means that the other capital assets has the propensity to be accumulated by the community members. However, overconnectivity among the capital assets sometimes creates one kind of rigidity traps that abstains community members to innovate and to change their livelihood activities, while the disconnections or poor connection among the capital assets create a poverty trap that also reduces the susceptibility or the ability of the communities to innovate. And finally, assets creates opportunities, and these opportunities actually belongs to the diversification of livelihoods as well as a new type of activities that should be taken under the reality of different stresses, as we have already discussed. And the vulnerability literature suggests that vulnerability is the propensity of the system to be exposed to different climatic stresses. And the vulnerability concept encompasses that the vulnerability is the accumulation of exposure and sensitivity. Some other researchers suggest that this is the accumulation of exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity. But in this research, we have considered vulnerability as the combination of exposure and sensitivity, because some of the researchers suggest that when we talk about sensitivity, it also talks about adaptive capacity. So here the exposure is the frequency, extent, and duration of different climatic stresses, and sensitivity is the degree to which a system is either positively or negatively affected by the climatic stresses. Climate vulnerability of rural livelihoods suggests that the stock of capital assets could be considered as the proxy of understanding the sustainability of rural livelihoods. Because as I said already, that these capital assets are the basis, or these assets actually provides with the ability of the communities to sustain or stabilize their livelihoods. And exposure reduces the ability of the communities to exploit the resources or the capitals. And the accumulation of capital assets actually reduces the sensitivity of livelihoods to different stresses. Based on this theoretical proposition, the research questions involve how the exploitation of capital assets are constrained by the climatic stresses. And the other research question involves the extent to which the capital assets contribute to buffer against the climatic stresses to sustain the livelihoods. And this research has been conducted in Bangladesh, as it is already been has been recognized by international community that the Bangladesh is one of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world. And we have conducted this study in the northeastern floodplain of Bangladesh, which is a wetland-dominated system. And the agrarian system of the area is subjected to different types of climatic stresses like flash flood, regular seasonal flood, drought, and these sort of stresses. However, despite these different stresses, this study area is poorly studied, because it's observed that till 2014, only 2 scientific research paper, has been published in international peer-reviewed journal. So this research has been conducted to fill some of the gaps, research gaps that has already been observed in literature. So we have picked 2 case study areas. One is Hakaluki Haur and another one is Tanguar Haur, the 2 most important wetland systems of the area. Here, the Hakaluki Haor is the largest wetland system, freshwater wetland system in Bangladesh, and having an area of 41,000 hectares. And the surrounding villages are located in 11 unions, which are distributed in 4 sub-districts of 2 districts of Bangladesh. That means Sylhet and Bajar. And the most of the Haor area has single rotation of paddy crop, while some of the areas have multiple rotation of crops. That means that there is a special distribution, a land formation of this Haor, which allows people to have multiple crops in some areas. Fishing is another important livelihood activities, but because of the poor management system and insufficient policy, poor communities of the area has little access to these fishing activities, which are usually captured by the local elites, which is the subject matter of another type of research. And the Tangur Haor is another important site, particularly for biodiversity conservation. It also has a very huge ecosystem services. And this area is already considered as the Ramsar World Heritage Site, one of the 2 Ramsar sites in Bangladesh. It has an area of more than 9,000 hectares, but almost all the areas of this wetland is single crop. Boro rice is cultivated by the farmers, and fishing activities has now been performed under the process of co-management, which is a newly practiced institutional process of resource management. And this new type of management has shown some degree of success in the area. So to conduct the research, we have adopted community-based participatory approach, which is helpful for understanding perceptual and experience-based observation. And we use mixed method research design, which involves both qualitative and quantitative data collection. Our mixed method research design because of the ability of mixed method to triangulate the observations because of this, through its methodological overlap and with the validity of the research. While the multiple case studies we have used in this study for perceptual observation and also particularly to contribute in literature than generalization. We selected 8 villages from Hakaluki Haor and 4 villages from Tangur Haor for our survey and other type of data collection. Villages were selected using 5 criteria, selection criteria, which involved the village should be located close to the wetland system, and the villages, each of the village should be selected from each of the union, and the villages should not be very much close to each other. And the village should have a history of climatic stresses, and the majority of the people of the villages should depend on the natural resources. And we selected 8 villages from Hakaluki Haor out of 11 because 3 of the villages are very close to each other, and that is why we excluded those 3 villages. Our qualitative data collection involved both focus groups and key informant interviews. We had 15 focus group discussions in these 8 villages, and the members of the focus group discussion were selected purposively. 8 to 10 participants were identified to participate in the focus groups, and those focus groups extended for 1.5 hours for focus group best practices as it is suggested in the literature. And during these sessions, we identified the different climatic stresses, the history, the background of knowledge about climatic stresses. Key informant interviews involved the interviews of local leaders, as well as the government officials and the representatives of different livelihood groups. And these key informant interviews actually helped us to triangulate the focus group outcomes. Our quantitative data collection involved this household survey of 354 households, where 237 households were surveyed from the villages of Hakaluki Haor and 117 households were surveyed from Tangur Haor. We asked them 58 questions which involved different climatic stresses, capital asset ownership, and accumulation of different capital assets and their perceptions. Our data analysis had both the qualitative and quantitative approaches. We analyzed our qualitative data for studying exposure, and we developed a stress calendar based on the observations of the community members. And then we developed a stress map, which these two gave us the perception about temporal and spatial nature of different climatic stresses. To do this, we used content analysis, which is a process of analyzing qualitative data by predetermined predetermined codification criteria. And then we analyze our quantitative data for exposure study by using ordered logistic regression to identify which factors are contributing in their perception to see the different climatic stresses. And another set of ordered logistic regression were developed to understand what factors are contributing to the degradation of or erosion of the capital assets. Our sensitivity analysis involved content analysis using coding and for triangulating the observations of quantitative outcomes. For our quantitative analysis, we use partial least square regression to see the connectivity among the variables, and therefore we conducted factor analysis to reduce the variables. Here, partial least square regression itself is a useful technique for reducing variables, but despite that, we use factor analysis because of limitation of partial least square regression and the limitation of factor analysis. Partial least square regression gives us an observation of different capital asset based connectivity. However, it cannot suggest us with what is the independent nature of variables to make different associations. So to overcome with this problem, we use factor analysis. Then we estimated our sensitivity of different households by an adopted form of equation. This equation was firstly developed by Joshua Sinner and his colleagues in 2014 for community-based sensitivity. So this equation was developed, and then we detected the threshold of sensitivity, and then we identified what factors are actually contributing to the sensitivity. So this is the climatic stress calendar. We observed that usually the community members observe a climatic stress when they actually physically experience the climatic stresses, although the meteorologists observe that the historical trend, but historical trends sometimes do not reflect adequately the perceptions of the communities. Because as it is suggested in literature, and also I have observed in the field, that the community members actually observes our climatic stress when it actually destroys their resources. Here's the stress map of Hakaluki-Haur. It suggests that there are a number of streams, canals, rivers are actually taking water into the wetland, but there is only one outlet, that is the Turi River, which is actually silted over the years, and it has the capacity of water carrying capacity has been reduced significantly, and that is why this water cannot be taken out of the wetland, which is creating a water stagnancy situation, and ultimately reduces the capacity of the farmers to crop inside the wetland, and also because of the siltation inside the canals and rivers. During the dry season, the farmers cannot irrigate their lands. Similar situation has also been observed in Tanguar-Haur, which is the part of bigger wetland networks, and there are numerous creeks, channels, and rivers, big rivers like Baulai River, Jadukata River. These rivers are taking water into the Tanguar-Haur, but there is only one outlet, a major outlet, which is insufficient to carry out all the water because of the siltation problem once again in this area. Although drought is not a big problem here, like Hakaluki-Haur, but Tanguar-Haur is still susceptible to different flash floods, particularly because it's closely located to the Indian upland, and this flash flood water run into the wetland all on a sudden and destroys the whole crop. And then we observed that the community members of Hakaluki-Haur, Tanguar-Haur, and two Haurs together have different perceptions about the stresses. For example, community members consider duration and loss of duration of drought and loss caused by the drought is the main factor for understanding the drought. So here the duration is a major matter because it actually if the drought elongates, it actually destroys the crops, and that is why people sometimes have to keep their land out of cultivation. And in Hakaluki-Haur, a big number of land remains fallow, and those are not usually cultivated. On the other hand, in the case of flash flood, usually the loss that is incurred by the flash flood is considered. Here, the duration is not the big matter, because when flash flood comes into the wetland systems, it actually destroys the whole system. So duration is not a big concern here. So different perceptions are involved in understanding or detecting the stresses we observe. Therefore, we try to identify what factors are actually contributing to the loss or erosion of different capital assets. We observe that out of several variables, we see that the most frequent variables are the loss that are usually caused by the different stresses, and also the uh, the factor that the natural resource dependency of the community members, the land use practices. These variables are highly significant with the loss of different capital assets. Out of this understanding, the observation of on exposure, we find that the climatic events are considered by the community members as the stress when they perceive physically it, as I have already mentioned this, and the biophysical change in the areas are also equally important. Likewise, the social factors and the variation in climatic events are equally important for understanding the exposure, although it is less taught. And the community members' perceptions usually go beyond the observation of meteorologists, while the meteorologists consider the climatic stresses based on the duration and the variation of these stresses. Again, the climatic stresses, along with the resource use behavior, are actually causing the degradation of the different capital assets. So now, in the case of sensitivity, we conducted partial least square regression, and we observed that all the capital assets are almost positively connected except for natural and social capital, while in the case of Tangur Haur, these capital assets are also connected, but the social capital is not positively connected with natural capital, manufactured capital, or human capital. And in the case of total study, we observe the reflection of Hakaluki Haur. Here, it happens in the Hakaluki Haur because when a person has more amount of natural capital or the land, they usually do not intend to establish collective actions for organizational development, because they can substitute the supports from organizations by their own connectivity with other supports, especially from governments and external agencies. But in the case of Tangur Haur, the situation is a bit different. Here, government organizations, along with IUCN and CNRS and local organizations, non-government organizations, are active there, and they usually provide with all types of supports like human capital, information about new types of agricultural practices, and manufactured capitals like tractor supports and other things, which are available. So that is why these community members do not need to establish collective actions. But the problem, this is a good example of how the external agencies can contribute in social in adaptation process. But the problem is when the project will disappear or it will close, there will be a very big vacancy, and the community members will not be able to substitute this thing. So probably a big challenge is coming ahead of the community members to the people of Tangur Haur. And then we identified the latent variables that because we had a very big set of variables, so we wanted to identify what are the key factors, underlying factors that are contributing to these stresses. And we observed that the primary production variables, which involve the land resources, their equipments for agricultural practices, their credit access, this formal and in both formal and informal credit access, their production knowledge, the experience of farmers to cultivate, their community organizations, and production support variables. Under these 5 factors, usually all the variables are clustered, and that is how we identified the level of identified the underlying factors. And then we calculated the sensitivity, and we found that the threshold level for Hakaluki Haur is minus 0.15, while for Tangur Haur is 0.12, and for total study is minus 0.13. It happens because when the value of this sensitivity is positive, we can say that these communities are highly vulnerable to climatic stresses, and when the value is negative, then the community members are usually not that much vulnerable. But and based on the equation, our assumption was that the 0 would be the threshold level, but we used agglomerative cluster analysis to identify the threshold level, and it actually considers the relative distance of different observations. So that is why the value is not exactly 0, but very close to 0 of the threshold level. And then we identified what factors are actually contributing to the climatic stresses, or how these things are increasing the sensitivity of the households. We observed that the credit access and the community organizations, creating the higher chance to be sensitive to climatic stresses. And in the case of Tangur Haur, we observe that the primary production variables reduces the sensitivity, reduces the chances of sensitivity. And in the case of total, we observe that the primary production variables reduces the chances of the sensitivity, while the credit access and community organization increases the chances of sensitivity. Here we see that the community organizations and credit access, although these two are considered as adaptation measures, rather the factor of sensitivity, but we see that these things are positively contributing to sensitivity. It happens because actually the poor households who are mostly vulnerable to climatic stresses usually develop the community organizations. So this is their adaptive activities, but not sufficiently. It's reducing the sensitivity. So despite having a strong propensity or will to get adapted, their activities are not sufficient to make adequate adaptation practice. And the natural, and as we say that natural resource dependence creates the sensitivity, but here we observe that the primary production variables, which is mostly natural resources, are reducing the sensitivity. It happens because people are getting chances to exploit different types of natural assets. Like when farmer is abstained or lost their agriculture, they can substitute the income by fishing in the area, because in Tangur Haur fishing is allowed by the community members based on the co-management. So the diversified use of natural resources can be considered as one kind of adaptation practice. Based on the understanding of the sensitivity, we observe that the capital assets in the study area, they are poorly connected. There's still a space through which they can innovate. And the poor households reduce the sensitivity by increasing the livelihood diversity, not by increasing their income. Again, in the case of poor households, they undertake more collective action and they seek credit access as their way to getting adapted with the climatic stresses, although these are not sufficient for the present stress. And both private and common property access could be a useful measure to reduce the susceptibility to climatic stresses. So we need to increase the access of the community members to different types of assets. This research has both contribution to both literature and policy. And through this research, we suggest that the definition of exposure, which has already been given by IPCC, should be reconsidered, where it is said that the social factors and the climatic stresses are the main causes of exposure. But in this study, we observed that along with these two things, we also need to consider the local level environmental degradation, like siltation, which is a major result of upland forest destruction. So we also need to consider this in our exposure studies. Conventional variables of exposure study like duration, interval, and extent are not sufficient to understand the actual level of exposure at the community level. And finally, the property right can be considered as a measure of reducing sensitivity by increasing the adaptation practices. And to policy, this research suggests that the adaptation measures should be taken based on the physical existence of the physical propensity of the climatic stresses, and based on the losses that are usually incurred by these stresses. And beyond that, the government officials and policymakers should use the opportunity of diversifying the resource use by incorporating formal and informal resource use practices like co-management, which is a useful technique for sustainable natural resource management for adaptation practice. These are the references I used to develop my concepts and in this presentation. And the maps of the study areas were supplied by the Department of Environment of Bangladesh and IUC in Bangladesh. And I'd like to acknowledge McGill University for giving me opportunity to conduct my research. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they provided me with necessary documents, and they also provided me funds to conduct the research. Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation provided me funding to conduct my PhD study. I'm very much highly acknowledging the contribution of South Asian Network for Development and Environmental Economics and Asian Center for Development for arranging my fieldwork funding. Metropolitan University hosted me here, so I'm greatly acknowledging them. and Shahjalal University of Science and Technology provided me with some logistics support. So thank you very much. That was all about my presentation, and I would like to hear something from you that to support my further development of my study. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rahman. Now, Professor Dr. Muhammad Abdul Munim Joarder, Department of Economics, Shahjalal University of Science and Technology, Sylhet, will discuss on Mr. Rahman's presentation. I would like to invite Professor Joarder.
First of all, I would like to thank Saleh for giving me the opportunity to discuss discuss paper. And I have requested him earlier that I can only discuss one paper, not the both papers. So I choose the second one, and he told me to discuss mainly on the methodological parts. Before going to discuss the second paper that he did on sensitivity analysis connecting with capital assets conditional on climatic stress. So he assessed Tuihedur Rahman livelihood sensitivity of communities, Howard and Tagua Howard, considering climatic factors conditional on capital assets. The major thing is that he used a unique data source using the mixed method, collected quantitative data from 12 villages and qualitative data from around 54 or 57 respondents. The statistical methods in his second paper, he used at first the partial least squares, though he used the principal component analysis. To reduce the number of explanatory variables. Later, he developed an index of livelihood sensitivity following Sinar ETA. He combined the first two approaches to show his results using a logic model where sensitive, climatic sensitive groups are equal to 1, otherwise equal to 0. Before he also claimed that his logic model was reliable. Finally, this is his major findings of the second paper. Vulnerable people reduce sensitivity through intensive use of natural resources. And he defined two groups of people, poor and rich, though he does not mention how he calculated these two groups, who are poor and who are rich. Mainly, he got these findings, those whose family have migrants outside. They are rich, they are getting more remittances, that's why they are not more stressed, and they are mainly dependent on non-natural resources. Now, going to discuss on the statistical part of his second paper. My first concern is his livelihood capital assets, where he did not provide us any links because he used throughout the whole paper the manufactured capital. I was confused. What is manufactured capital? That's why, because I'm an economist, not an accountant or resource economist. I try to search different papers. Most of the papers, in fact, so far I understand from his paper that this manufactured capital is in fact physical capital. Followed this paper to generate this linkage. This is quoted from this paper where they have uh, showed us how they have defined the vulnerability, which is to some extent environmental stress, how it is linked with another, and what should be the policies, institutions, and processes. What are the expected likelihood outcomes that he was searching for? This is the technique. Then most of the uh, paper related to this try to connect between the social capital and financial capital. That's why okay, to show the bonding social capital, bridging social capital, and this social capital they claim that interlinked with perceived desirability and perceived feasibility. Uh, Throughout the paper, though Mr. Tuihedur Rahman tried to connect this and claimed that he did not find any strong connection between the social capital and natural capital, positively or negatively. Now, I'm jumping to his. So, in his discussion, he mainly did the literature review in his second paper. That's why I jumped that part and going to the mixed method part. Most of the times in this type of research where there is focus group discussion and also the quantitative part of structured questionnaire. He did the pilot research also, but the thing is that why he was using the mixed research in his empirical parts, he did not mention it properly. That's why the first thing is that always it is said that the credibility or trustworthiness, even the validity of mixed research is an important issue. Which part is mainly he emphasized, whether the qualitative part or the quantitative part in a single paper, how we connect is very important. Mainly this mixed method is used in marketing and management research, even not in our economics field. That's why Jack suggests that to use respondent-driven sampling in this type of mixed research where you need the focus group discussion and also the quantitative data collection. The second thing is from his second paper, it was not available to see the frequency of responses to main questions, such as where he has given the 58 questions. Different types of capital assets, their natural hazards, shocks, intensity of disasters, exposure of risk, or otherwise he termed it as vulnerability. The thing is that I did not find any summary statistics of these variables. Is it my fault? Sorry. I did not find any summary statistics. The second thing is that the particular values of FC, NC, MC, HC, I mean different types of social capital and also different indices for sensitivities were not provided. One of my major thing is that in analyzing the capital assets, he did not mention the reference category. That's why it becomes very difficult to compare one capital assets with another capital assets. Now, about the partial effects. This is generally done with partial effects. In doing the partial effects, I did not find any interaction or mediator effects. Interaction variables were not mentioned in your paper. Though I tried to find the interaction effect in different component analysis, in factor loadings and other factors. You have 5 5 predictor variables and 5 dependent variables there. How they are interlinked, what is the moderator variable, I was not aware of that paper. Moreover, it was very difficult to analyze the interaction effect from these partial least squares. Due to this, my suggestion is to use smart PLS, smart partial least squares. Now, I am going to the final part of your paper about the logic model. Before going to discuss the logic model, I would like to get a clear overview and justification of your sensitivity index. How, or what kind of weight you have given, what are the main criteria to give weight in different variables to generate the weight of climatic stress and other stuff. It was very difficult. So your indexation was not justified in the paper. Moreover, if I accept that index, then I am not sure whether to use the logic model. In your paper, you also only gave us the coefficient results. In any discrete choice models, coefficient we know that is not a strong predictor of the model. Better you should analyze the marginal effects. Finally, in binary choice model that you claimed in your paper that I mentioned in my summary, that world chi-square is the robustness check of your paper. Basically, world chi-square is just a test of statistical elasticity. And if you do the robust standard errors, you will easily get in any software the chi-square test. Rather, model performance should be tested using the R-square and the percentage of correctly classified responses ranges. I have mentioned one of my paper with my PhD supervisor, which is published in Global Environmental Change in 2013. That is also based on Bangladesh and environmental migrants. All the results of the logic model should be done either with marginal effects or with odd ratio. At present, it is very difficult to link findings and also to generalize your findings. Finally, in all your tables, you gave us the standard errors in the parentheses, but you noted that p-values. That's why I was a bit confused. All other things, such as the minor things about the referencing and other, I leave it for your Twitter. You can follow the Chicago standard or other methods. Even you can use the recent, because you have given me the paper where all the references with abstract is given of other papers. Maybe that was typos and errors. All in all, it's a good initiative. I would like to thank Tuihedur Rahman for this kind of initiative, and hopefully it will give you in future a better publication of Tangwar Howard and Hakalukuha. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to be a discussant here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Joarder. Now, Dr. MuntahaRakib, Assistant Professor, Department of Economics, Shahjalal University of Science and Technology, will discuss on the presentation. I would like to invite Dr. Rakib.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for inviting me here and giving me a chance to tell something about Mr. Tuihedur Rahman's presentation. I will mainly focus on the first paper, which was based on capital assets. Actually, both of the papers and there are some variables in common. However, I think some of my comments will be in general, and I'll specify some of those comments for the first paper. So at first I have some confusions to clear. So maybe for sampling, I am confused whether you have taken any community report for selecting stress, um, because stress is really a relative term. So maybe a climatic stress for one family or one person, maybe not stress for some other else. So it's better to take some community report from some reliable person in a community and then compare with the household or individual report with the community one to check whether it is really a stress or not and how severe was it. Then you mentioned that after selecting sample, you dropped some of your villages, like 3 or 4 villages. So I'm wondering on what criteria, on the basis of what criteria you dropped those villages. You in your paper where you know that focus group discussion, you took several focus of this group discussion, and the members were mainly already group members. I mean, already the focus group participants are group of some of the members of some of the groups in community levels. So my understanding is that if somebody is already a group member, so his social capital is already in a higher level than a normal villager, and maybe they are more or less well perceived than a normal villager who are not a group member or participant. And also maybe a group member in a village level is relatively affluent than a normal villager or marginal farmers. So I suspect some endogeneity issues here, and as well as I just want to know, as Joarder sir also said that you don't have any summary statistics. So it's a crucial point in any paper to for the understanding of your variables, and especially the key variables. So what percentage of villagers are group members in your study area? That's also an important issue here. I'm also wondering, in selecting the focus group discussion members, did you emphasize the age issue? Because a household head with maybe 25 years of age or 30 years of age is not that efficient to tell about climate stress for last 20 years or so. Well, another point is, how did the respondents define the moderately lost or extremely loss? I mean, for any climatic stress, you group three types of loss, that is moderate, extreme, and marginal, I think. So what was the criteria for selecting which was extreme loss? Was it in monetary terms? It's also relative for me. So there should be some clear standpoint in the paper. How did you define those 3 points? Okay, and for the climate stresses, I came to know 4 types of stresses mainly in your sampling area. I mean, both of the area. One is drought, extreme rainfall, regular flood, and flash flood. So it would be good to see some covariate nature of these stresses. That means whether the stress affected only the villages or only a couple of households or only the unions or greater than that, which would be a better understanding of how severe the stress was. Okay. From table 1 of first paper, you reported only flash flood is severe. I mean, it's the report of the household, I mean, the respondents. So then why did you take the other regular events as stress? Because they only reported the flash flood as their major stress. Another one is, okay, so another confusion I have, you already included in there is a crop variable, and you included fishing and livestock there, so far I understand. Then why did you separate another variable as livelihood activity? Because in my sense, both are similar. I'm wondering why trust and reciprocity is negatively related with stresses, because I expect if someone has network and he or she might able to know about the stress prior to it, or can share some others' experiences and take possible coping and adaptation stress strategies. If he or she has good network and if he or she is a group member. So the result is a bit surprising, and I would like to see more strong interpretation for that. Measuring social capital is a bit tricky, and in your paper, I didn't find any clear outline or any clear definition of how did you measure social capital, because there are a number of components and number of issues to count or to measure social capital. If you whether I mean you may construct an index, or you may take the variables separately, like network, group participation, actively participate in meeting or not, community participation, and one is trust as well. So I would like to see a better definition and better understanding of social capital variable in your paper, and as it is also a crucial result in your paper, because stress is negatively related to social capital, which is normally a exceptional result, I would say. So okay, and you explained drought follows some regular timing. For example, you said for last 10 years drought occurred only 2 times and existed until like 1.5 months. So I think the community is well perceived that the drought will occur and in a certain time period in a specific year. So they might take some coping and adaptation strategies well ahead. For example, storing food and other coping strategies. And then, is it really a stress for them? That's also an issue. Explaining human capital, you just explained the, other way around. In a table, you said that you said that low human capital or low knowledge or perception is resultant that stresses more, drastically or something like that. But I would like to see the explanation in other way around. How stress affect the human capital rather than human capital affect stress, because this was the finding of your table, I understand. Another point is regular flood doesn't destroy their crops. You mentioned in your paper. But is it likely that sometimes regular flood showed its covariate nature? That might be also happen. If then, what is the consequences? It's also important for your paper. You separated rainfall, extreme rainfall, and flash flood. But in your paper, you also mentioned, and for general understanding, rainfall causes flash flood. Then what is the validity of taking both of the stresses separately rather than where one caused by another? Okay, another surprisingly result from table 5 of first paper, that is the loss of flash flood is positively related to financial capital. I need some more clarification in this result, because normally we know that stress may be, negatively affect any kinds of capital. So why the financial capital are positively related? And loss of rainfall is positively related to manufactured capital and financial capital. That's also an issue. And as Sir said, that manufactured capital is normally not used in this kind of analysis, because as you used any specific framework, so you have to define those components or stress issues according to those framework, or maybe note somewhere in your paper that why did you Why did you change the term or something? And you also said that another result, livelihood diversification, is negatively related to financial capital, which is also surprising in my understanding. Uh, One general comment for any of the paper is it's good to know the variable names in more understandable way rather than, I mean, technically define this in a standard paper. And page number, maybe you can also look about this issue. Page number was also missing there. Last but not least, at the end of 4.2 section of first paper, you classified 3 different household types. It is not clear actually how you can classify the household, those dependent on nature based on natural resources, and how can you classify them according to their perception? Because especially those who are partially dependent, I'm confused. I mean, those who are partially dependent on natural resources, how you can conclude that they are less perceived or partially perceived like that. Okay, and also there are some redundant information in your papers which takes long for a reader to reach the main goals. I would I would I request you to look up at this issue. And lastly, I would thank you for very good presentation. As far as I remember, your last presentation after your proposal, it's much well ahead. You have achieved a lot in this short time period. And my very good wishes for your further studies. And thank you again for giving me a chance to tell something. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. MuntahaRakib. Now, I would like to request our Honorable Chief Guest, Professor Dr. Wahiduddin Mahmud.
এমনিতে আমি জোরে বললাম this is a topic which has not, this is a region, not a topic. This topic, this region has not, which is an extremely interesting region, has not been researched, and there have been so many few publications on that. I do hope that you will be doing lots of publications on this. The two commentators, I mean, very interesting interventions. I like those. That doesn't diminish anyway the difficult topic we are doing. But I'm constrained to go into the details because when a PhD student candidate is almost near completion of his thesis, nobody else knows better than him on that topic, not even his supervisor. That's the beauty of this. But I appreciate all the comments. And let me tell you, I mean, very broadly why this topic is so interesting. One is, of course, that you will get a lot of attention because of the sustainable development goals and sustainability sustainability, economic sustainability, but more so environmental sustainability is so much now stressed in the global development goals. Second, it's much more important for Bangladesh, as you know, because not only because Bangladesh is vulnerable to climate change, global warming and other things, but also Bangladesh, even without climate change, Bangladesh is one of the most ecologically sensitive areas. Because of its environment, the only country in the world which is supposed said to be the largest natural system of drainage in the world, and the only country which is on a delta, entire country. And one of the reasons why this this area is important is because Bangladesh has so little natural resource base per capita. If you think in terms of course, Bangladesh's population density is by far the land per capita is by far the lowest in the world. Our nearest competitor is South Korea, which doesn't have even half of this. Many people then, some economists then argue that no, Bangladesh is not that much of an exception because in terms of cultivable or arable land per capita, Bangladesh has not necessarily the lowest. In fact, South Korea has lower arable land per capita than Bangladesh. The reason is that all our land are arable land, almost. We have so little non-arable natural resource base, which means areas like this, forest areas, wetland areas, which are not, strictly speaking, arable of the year, and be used for fishing and others. So it's so much important for Bangladesh to maximize economic gains from non-arable resource base. Should be a fundamental strategy of any development, long-term development strategy of Bangladesh. And you are very right then why we talk so much of agricultural productivity, crop productivity, self-sufficient in food grain, and we have done so little in planning the best use of our non-arable areas, which are in essence very vulnerable for the people of livelihoods of those in the locality, but at the same time are very resourceful. That reminds me one thing, which you mentioned just in one sentence, I think, that some of these areas, these Haor areas, wetland areas, or in Bangladesh, the coastal areas, their natural base is such that if exploited, they can be very resourceful. They can add so much to GDP growth and economic gains of the people. But the irony is that the people who live there normally do not gain from the exploitation of the economic exploitation of those resources. Globally, it's called resource curse. Most resourceful areas in terms of mining and other things in South Africa. You have heard about the diamond, blood diamond, that you can be in an area which produces diamond, but they are the poorest people in terms of livelihood, the local people, because they employed outside. There is a similarity here in, say, in the southern belt of Bangladesh, where shrimp is produced, or potentially these Haor areas, which can be exploited for economic gains. But the problem you are looking at is very interesting, as the livelihoods of the people who live there and who have to adapt their livelihood. Now, you have a difficult, I appreciate the comment made because the problem itself is very difficult. One is, say, in terms of the climate, the environmental, ecological, environmental change. There is a natural process of ecological and environmental degradation or change, which is happening all the time in any particularly ecologically sensitive area. That's natural, historically happening. The other is man-made changes, because you do harm to the environment and therefore you create dams and other things. There are dams in India, on the other side of the border, which can affect our wetlands. The third is the global change, global warming and others. So there are three elements in what you call the dynamic of ecological vulnerability. And in analyzing those, you have the problem of collecting data for a snapshot picture, because you have been doing it whether qualitative data or quantitative data in a snapshot. But you are actually looking at the dynamic of the interactions between resource base, the environmental changes, and the capital, physical and human assets. Now, combining, not only you are doing the quantitative and qualitative data, which commentators say, but also combining snapshot picture with historical, dynamic changes is an extremely difficult thing. I'm sure you will be applying all the available tools of analysis to generate what we call, if not dynamic, but semi or quasi channel sort of data on at least event, not if not on household activities. So I sympathize with that. But looking at your some of the results and models, I think you are tackling, you are aware of all those complications, and I'm sure you are doing well. I was particularly interested in again, another complication is that the people themselves adopt, and that adaptation may be through individual adaptation. Bangladeshis normally adapt much more, cope much more by individual effort. Bangladeshis are somehow historically are not very community oriented. That's why you have Kumilla model of cooperatives failed, but microcredit succeeded. Why? Because microcredit doesn't need what you give loan in a group, but you do your own activity. So I would be interested in the type of social capital you are looking at. You have talked about credit, and there is some social capital in that they have group-based approach to accepting credit if it is microcredit. I don't think there is much. And then on top of that, this local individual initiative and community initiative, there are external interventions. Government, obviously, I said that we haven't done enough in terms of what we should do to intervene, to maximize to minimize the ecological vulnerability and maximize the economic gains, like developing sustainable fishery, coping with floods. At the same time, there are interactions between external public policy interactions with community-based interactions with individual initiatives. And I like your comments about the two-way relationship between which goes, if you are more equipped in human capital and assets, you can cope better On the other hand, the uh, it's all right. We can continue. If there is vulnerability, then you develop your own capacity to intervene. So there are, in all these uh, variables, there are both way interactions, which I'm sure again you are aware, but then the difficulty is to have any. At the end of the day, you'll have to get results which talk about causal correlations, which has all these. I am sure you have all these statistical packages and other things which uh, extract one way causality in with variables which interact with each other. But whatever how sophisticated the methodologies are, if there are inherent uh, problems about detecting interactions, separating interactions with causality, then an inherent problem can never be solved by methodologies. Although we pretend that we solve that problem, we can only partially solve that problem by adopting the identification method, by all other fixed effects. You are doing many other things like fixed effect. Anyway, I shouldn't go further into the details because I quite not what you have done. Or even I had known before and had have been given your report 1 week earlier, as I said, you will know much more than anybody else will do on this topic. But I again congratulate you because I think this is this is an neglected topic. We the topic, general topic is not neglected. Sustainability, climate change, livelihood, adjustment of livelihood to some vulnerability, ecological vulnerability, but applying that to our floodlands, particularly our areas, is why I don't know why it's a completely neglected area. And I share the blame of this neglect. You may have seen a paper of book of mine from the World Bank on seasonal hunger in Northwest Bengal, because we have talked so much about manga. That's another poverty pocket and extremely ecologically vulnerable area, the Rangpur area. But poverty pockets are not only there. Poverty pockets are also in Shinamgarh. Poverty pockets are also in some of the Haur areas. But unlike Manga area, which are really resource poor area with soil fertility poor soil fertility, and economically distant, disadvantaged. But these areas need not be deprived, economically deprived, because their resource potential is great. You can highlight that unlike other poverty pockets which are really resource poor, but these poverty pockets are not necessarily resource poor if they can be developed properly. I am so happy to be here with you, with some of the faculty of Shahjalal University, two of you were commentators, and I'm happy here to be in this university, which I'm told is one of the very growing resourceful universities, and you have the privilege of having a very able, experienced economist come Vice Chancellor Saleh, with a very favorite person of mine. I have worked with him in many contexts, and thank you very much for inviting me. EnamulHaque is there again. If there was one person really most qualified to comment on this, except our two commentators, your contribution
But EnamulHaque is the one who publishes most internationally in environmental economics. That's why he's in Sandy, which funded you. And I'm happy also to privileged also to be a bit partially connected with Sandy because I was the original proposal. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. আপনাদের সবাই সাথে দেখা করে আমার ভালো লাগছে। Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Muhammad Uddin. He will give Thanksgiving and closing address. Sir.
Tuihedur Rahman, is EnamulHaque, and of course, Professor Wahiduddin Mahmud, who has long been a mentor to many of us in the field of economics, my colleagues and guests from Shahjalal University, a very good morning and assalamu alaikum. I was wondering where to start from. About 2 years ago, I received an email from Sandy that whether if it is possible to provide a space to a researcher who is coming from McGill University. And they offered us, I cannot remember the amount, perhaps about 20,000 taka per month for the facilities they wanted. Then I replied, well, we are happy to accept him here, but we will not accept any money. We will provide the space on condition that you would present 2 papers in our university so that all our faculty members and students will get some benefit out of it. They agreed, and that is the story behind this seminar. The first one was held about a year ago. I don't remember the exact date. And I was scared about your future. That was quite raw, and I find very little to comment on that paper. But today, I'm very happy to see that your 2 papers are miles away from what you started with. And this happened to many of us. I still can remember my own work, PhD work. Initially, it was almost nothing, but eventually it took a shape. Well, enough discussion has already been made. This issue, rural livelihood, is not rural in fact, as Sir was talking about. These are some pockets. So our areas are hill areas in Chittagong hill tracts, even offshore islands of Bangladesh. And he was talking about Mangla and other parts, which are very vulnerable to salinity and other things. These are special areas. And it is unfortunate that the issue received our attention very late, perhaps not before the end of last century. And you mentioned that only 2 articles in peer-reviewed journals have been published. So the issue is new to many of us. All the aspects of this issue have not yet been touched even. So it is important for all of us to have something good out of your research. And I'm sure, as such said, at the end of the PhD research, it's not possible to incorporate many of the good suggestions made by scholars and the same thing perhaps would happen to you. But still, you go back and talk to your supervisor. If this can be accommodated, good. If not, don't mind. You have done wonderful. Okay? So I would like to end because we have time constraint. So Wahiduddin Mahmud and his team. At what time your plane is perhaps at 1 or 1:05. So we have very little time. I would like to thank you all, particularly my colleagues in this university who have arranged the seminar in short notice, and all the best for your endeavor.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable address. We have a little arrangement of refreshment, so I would like to request you to stay here.